Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, namaste, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are so happy that you are joining us today. Thank you so very much for being part of our Reading with Your Kids family. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. We have a great guest for you today. She is the author of Let's Make Yoga Magic. Her name is Heather Leia. If you are the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And if you're the author of a great children's book, you are also the head of your business. That's right. And your business is the business of selling your great children's book. And you want to do it right. That's why I think you should check out readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. INCFILE. readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. Inkfile helps you quickly and easily form your LLC, S Corp, C Corp, or any other business. Start your business today for as little as $49 and state fees. There's no contracts. There's no hidden fees. Inkfile has been trusted by over 150,000 businesses worldwide since 2004. Check it out today. Remember, you are the head of a business. Once you write your great children's book, you want to do it right. Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. INCFILE. readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. Coming to us from Washington, D.C., and hopefully she's not bringing all that turmoil that's coming out of Washington, D.C. And in fact, I think she's going to give us the opposite. She is here to talk about yoga with children and about her upcoming book and how we can introduce our kids to yoga, and maybe our kids can introduce yoga to us, and we can do it as a family. Please welcome to the show, Heather Leia. Heather, how are you?
I'm feeling great. How are you?
I am awesome. Heather has this, beautiful smile, and she just seems like so chill and relaxed and happy, and it must be the yoga.
Yeah, I think I'm not always chill and happy and relaxed, but I do think that yoga helps me be that way more often than if I wasn't practicing it as often as I was.
Before we get into talking about it for children, yoga is, I think yoga is misunderstood by a lot of people. So can you kind of tell us, give us a thumbnail description of what yoga is and what yoga isn't?
Sure. So I actually have some definitions of yoga that work for me that I think also aren't really what everyone thinks of when they think of yoga. I think the first thing our minds jump to is it's just a form of exercise. And on that note, it's like a very ancient form of exercise that dates back thousands of years. But it's really much more than that. I've found that yoga is a practice that as long as you're learning to be present, listening to your body, listening to your breath, you could be doing tree pose or down dog, but you can also just be walking and really enjoying the birds singing, or playing with your dog, playing with your family, or really just any sort of movement that feels good on the body. So I do teach and practice sort of the more traditional yoga shapes and poses, but I like to remind people that yoga is anything that our bodies do as we're breathing and being mindful that feels really good. So I think the definition of yoga is really, really broad. And when you put it like that, just about moving your body, feeling good, feeling strong, being present, it makes yoga a lot less scary because a lot of people get kind of nervous. I can't touch my toes. Oh, I'm not very thin. I don't feel very in shape. And yoga doesn't need any of those things. It's just about being present in your body.
Yeah. And I've done a little, I've taken a couple of yoga classes, and I have to tell you, one of the things I hear, and you can dispel this, or you might be surprised to hear this. I've heard a lot of people, a lot of Christians, a lot of Catholics who tell me that yoga is this evil religion, or this religion that can open you up to kind of evil forces. Now, there are also other people in the Catholic Church and other Christian denominations who tell you the exact opposite. So why don't you tell us? I don't know if you've heard any of that, and how would you respond to that?
Sure. So, from my experience, there's definitely elements of Buddhism that come in play. You attend certain yoga classes. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of times yoga and meditation will go hand in hand, and Buddhist meditation is very popular. It's just really, these sort of practices that have been passed down through, thousands of years, again, just like the physical practices of yoga. Mm-hmm. And I think also because yoga as a practice stems from India, and there's a lot of ties with Hinduism and like all these different gods and goddesses, that depending on where you go to a yoga class or who you're practicing with, if it's in that teacher spiritual practice to talk about the gods or goddesses or talk about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, all of a sudden someone can come and say, I just wanted to move my body. I didn't want to talk about these gods or goddesses, and I didn't want to talk about these sort of Buddhist spiritual teachings. And I think the thing that I've learned the most is being able to approach it and say, if I have a spiritual practice, whether it's the language of Christianity and talking about God and Jesus, or the language of Judaism, which is the religion I've been brought up with, which, talks about one God and, all these different rules that we want to follow, or talking about Buddhism that just talks about suffering and how do we create less suffering, or these other gods or goddesses from Hinduism, like they're all just different words. Mm-hmm. For the same things, mm-hmm. which is really just how do we get in touch with this higher self? How do we get in touch with our best self? Mm-hmm. And so some people are going to call that God, and some people are going to call that Jesus. But really it's just about being like your most authentic, kindest, nicest version of who you can be.
Awesome. So, well, I hope you didn't feel I put you on the spot. It's not what I meant to, but I wanted to make sure that if there was anybody who was listening and was coming from that perspective, that they didn't hit pause or stop, because I really think that there's a lot here, and especially if we can introduce our kids to getting into the habit of moving and exercise, and like you said, being present. And so why don't you talk to us about what you're doing with kids and how you're introducing kids to yoga?
Sure. So I've been a children's yoga teacher for about 4 or 5 years now. Before that, I was also a preschool teacher. And outside of that, I'm a behavior analyst working with kids with special needs. So I've always been working with kids, and I've always been trying to figure out ways to incorporate yoga into the things that I get to do, because it's something that I really love and enjoy. So in the past few years, I've started teaching yoga at a local preschool. And it's been such a fun time, and it looks very different than when I teach a class for adults. If I teach a class for adults, it might just be maybe a little philosophy or kind of a talk to get us centered, maybe some meditation, and then moving the body, and then pausing again with meditation at the end. With kids, obviously, you have to do a lot more to keep them interested, and their bodies need to move a lot more. So we might start by listening to a singing bowl or chimes just to get present and say, oh, how long can we hear that sound before it goes away and it gets too quiet? And then we pass the chime around, and each person gets to practice saying kind words and have passing hands to the other person. So it's really about yoga not just as movement, but also like, how are we learning to be our best self? How do we say kind words like, good morning, thanks for being my friend, I'm glad to see you. And then we'll get up and use yoga cards, like lots of pictures, and do all the different shapes that, you might think about, tree pose and down dog pose and snake pose, like all different poses that for kids will kind of be modified, just to practice balance, to practice strength. And then maybe we'll practice deep breathing. So there's tools like breathing balls where they get big and small. So we pass it around. We talk about our lungs and our ribs and how they get big and small like a balloon as we breathe. So then everyone practices taking a big breath, maybe 2 big breaths. And then maybe we'll get up and do partner yoga poses and, try things like holding hands while standing up and down and not falling over, doing tree pose but holding hands with your friend. There's just a whole bunch of ways to get kids to move your bodies and to smile and to laugh. And so kids' yoga classes move really quickly. And then a lot of times I'll incorporate a book like right in the middle, like we've just been moving, had our energy really high, and then we'll sit, read a book, whether it's about kindness or giving hugs or different yoga poses or about taking deep breaths, and then we go back to doing more movement. So kids yoga is very, in my experience, like rapid moving, lots of different activities, but all of them are focused on moving the body, trying to notice the breath, and also just fostering a sense of gratitude and kindness.
I love that. I love that idea of taking turns, saying a kind word to one another, being grateful. These are wonderful, wonderful things. I'm wondering how important is it for kids to just be, because, you're talking about kids moving and moving fast and getting them moving fast. I mean, that happens automatically. They wake up, they're out of bed,
Right.
They're bouncing off the walls, especially some kids. How important is it for them to kind of go from that kind of just exerting energy and just going crazy to using the same kind of energy, but being aware of how they're moving and what they're moving?
Sure. So that's the sort of thing that I think when you're teaching adults doesn't happen naturally, and especially when you're teaching kids, just takes a lot of repetition. So we'll do things like we'll be lying down on our backs, and we'll put little like wooden blocks on everyone's belly button. So it's like, oh, you're breathing, but now you can feel your belly moving up and down because there's like a block there. Mm-hmm. And you lie down all the time, but you just might not always feel it, mm-hmm. if that makes any sense.
Now, how can parents start, and especially a parent who is also new to yoga and they don't live in a community where there's a kids yoga class, and besides that, the parents just want to do something, just one more thing with their kids. How can they get into practicing yoga as a family?
That's a great question. And I would say the best way to start practicing yoga with your family is to make it a routine and to make it really simple. So it might just be before bed, we do 3 yoga poses, or when we wake up, when we're all eating breakfast, we all say one thing that we're grateful for, or try to notice, how am I feeling in this moment? And then you can add to that routine. When it becomes really normal to do that one thing you picked, maybe you add one more thing. Oh, let's always do one partner pose when we first wake up, or just keeping it a routine, but keeping it really consistent. Mm-hmm. I know that even though I have a lot of variety, and when I teach kids yoga, I always start class the same and end class the same, with listening to the singing bowl, saying kind words, and we always end with affirmations, giving our body a hug, saying words that we hope for ourselves, like I am happy, I am healthy, I'm kind, and then rubbing our hands together, closing our eyes, and saying a moment of peace. And then we just sit there for 1, 2, 3 breaths. And kids, even as young as 2, 2.5, after a couple weeks, they are doing it on their own. Like, they know what to do. So I would just say it's all about the consistency and making a habit out of it.
Now earlier on, I asked you to kind of address some people who might have religious concerns, and you did a great job at that. Another thing that I hear oftentimes, especially from guys my age, is when they hear someone talking about yoga, they go, oh, that woo-woo stuff. I'm not into that kind of woo-woo stuff. What would you say to that guy?
Sure. I would say, be open, take what you like, and leave the rest. Like, don't worry about it. So if you hear something that feels like, I don't believe that, or that's beyond my comfort zone, forget about it. Don't stress about it. Don't throw away the whole thing just because there's things that you don't like. If the only piece of it that you like is the physical stretching, great. Stretching's mm-hmm. great for you. Mm-hmm. If the only thing you like is being able to take a few deep breaths and think about what you're grateful for a few moments a day, do that. Like, you don't have to do any of the rest. And I think when I try to tell people who say, oh, I tried yoga once, I didn't like it, I say, oh, there's a yoga for everyone. And it's really just about finding the teacher or the style or the element of yoga that resonates with you and being open to that. And also knowing that as we grow and change as people, different things are going to appeal to us. So the yoga that I was practicing 9 years ago when I was first introduced to it, it's very different than what my practice looks like now. And so I have to be open to always saying, this doesn't feel right. Maybe I need to go find a new teacher or a new style, or a new studio, or take a step back and work more on my meditation practice instead of my physical practice. Maybe I do need to get more into this other thing that I've heard about. So, just knowing that yoga is very fluid, just like we are. And so just being flexible with ourselves mentally to be accepting of, whatever comes, whatever sounds good.
Mm-hmm. And as you were answering that guy who was saying woo woo and all that, I was taken back to my days as a college athlete and also as a high school coach. And a lot of the things that you were talking about, doing that discipline, being consistent, pushing yourself, stretching yourself, but also giving yourself affirmations and kind of, getting your mind in the right place. You do that as a competitive athlete. You're doing it with a lot of yelling and screaming, so you're not doing it with meditation, but it's the same. You're working on the same kind of thing. You're incorporating that positive thinking and focus with the physical activity. And, for guys my age, we can't be jumping up and down and running and screaming like we did when we were in high school and college. And it looks silly when we do it. So it seems like yoga would be a much more beneficial way for us to spend our time.
Right. And like I said, there's so many kinds of yoga. There's laughing yoga, which you go and you're really just doing all this activities that make you laugh, like blowing bubbles and like, ha, 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 like silly things. But it actually raises the dopamine levels of your brain, like forced laughter. And there's also like the yoga of sleep, like yoga nidra. So you go and it's a 45-minute session where you're just laying down and the teacher's talking to you. You don't move a muscle. And it's all about relaxing the mind and the nervous system, not necessarily the body. So there's a million ways to like look at yoga. And so I think if there's anything I would want your listeners to take away from it is to say like whatever they think yoga is a million times bigger than that. Like that's just the tip of the iceberg. And there's a million other ways to experience yoga, which is really just being present.
Well, one of the ways people are going to be able to experience yoga is through your book, which is coming out in May of 2019.
Yep,
and I understand
right.
is the working title Yoga for Children?
It's Let's Make Yoga Magic.
Let's Make Yoga Magic. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So it's a really, really fun book. It's a board book. So it's really great for kids even as young as, 2, 1.5, 2, as soon as they start to flip pages and look at those board books. This is a great book for them. Every single page has a child featured doing a different yoga pose, or what I call them as yoga shapes. Just how to make different shapes with our bodies, and have a lot of fun with it. And every page is also animated. So you can move flaps or open things up or spin things, and it's going to change the way the shape appears on the page. So if there's a child doing butterfly pose, they have wings that you can flap. If it's bridge pose, you can have water moving underneath the bridge. So it really kind of brings the poses and the shapes to life, which is kind of why the title of Yoga Magic, things can kind of come alive. And also just like the magic that we feel in our bodies, like when you stretch or when you grow or when you're being present with your body and you feel new things. So there's so much there. And each pose has a different child and then also a little tiny poem to just describe how to do the pose or how you feel when you're in the pose. So it's really simple, but I think going back to your earlier question about how can you incorporate yoga in your home life with children, even as simple as reading that book every morning and doing each pose, or just saying, oh, which pose do we want to try before bed, and picking your favorite. That's a really easy way to start getting those routines down and part of family life.
Now here's a question, and I'm tapping into this because in addition to being a yoga expert and an author of a yoga book for kids, you're also an assistant behavior analyst. And I'm wondering, for the families out there who have kids that are struggling with ADHD and different attention issues, is yoga possibly a way to help kids kind of control that a little bit better?
Sure. I think anything that you do with your kid that creates structure or boundaries in a fun way that they enjoy can always help kind of rein in that chaos. You know, life with kids is always going to feel quite chaotic, but having things that are structured are helpful to kind of rein it in, even if it's just for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And again, just go back to creating those routines. So what I've seen mostly when I'm teaching preschool is I could come in and the class can be having a really high energy day. But as soon as I ring the singing bowl, at least half of them sit right down, cross-legged, like wanting to kind of participate in that routine. Mm-hmm. And then once we do some movement and I say, okay, let's lay down and take 10 slow breaths, everyone's laying down to take 10 slow breaths, even if someone's fidgeting or moving or, you know, kind of doing their own thing. Just the idea of having routines and your body becomes familiar with it, mm-hmm. It can be a calming strategy. I've gotten feedback from parents of former students who have said, when my child's at home and he's having a really difficult time with, you know, any number of things, he might go on his own and have a moment of peace and kind of walk himself through these strategies. And that's really what my hope is for the book, that kids can learn the poses either with their teachers or with their parents, but then they'll take the book and do it on their own when they feel like moving or when they feel like they need to calm down or they feel like they need to get that excess energy out.
Excellent. Now, before we go and before we tell folks about your website, is there a really kind of simple first exercise that you can tell us about that parents can try to kind of get the ball rolling?
Sure. I would say any sort of movement, maybe it's putting on like a really fun song and just having the whole family dance around for 3 minutes. Just no phones, no screens, just dancing and laughing and being silly. And then maybe at the end laying down and taking a couple deep breaths together after everyone's heart rate is up. Because it doesn't have to be like down dog, up dog, tree pose. It can just be any sort of movement where families are having fun together. So doing that, laying down, taking deep breaths, and then maybe practicing asking for hugs, asking, hey, how do you feel? Do you want a hug right now? And then sharing what you're grateful for. So I know that was kind of a few different things, but that's something that would take less than 5 minutes that could bring a family feeling closer together and kind of get everyone on the same page feeling present.
Well, I didn't know that that's what you were going to say, but I can absolutely endorse that. We didn't do the laying down afterwards, but this past weekend my son got married and we went out and we danced all night long. Well, we didn't lay down, but we got together afterwards and we were doing a whole lot of heavy breathing just because we were exhausted and we felt so close together and it was so much fun. I mean, even my daughter-in-law's 87-year-old grandmother was on the floor. I don't think she was twerking, but she was dancing her head off.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And it just goes to show that families can do yoga and movement together in any place and at any age. It's not just for little kids. It's not just for young parents. It's really for everybody. And that's really what I try to write in the book, that yoga is for everybody. And that every person's body is going to make the shapes in their own way. And that's what's so magical about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, tell folks where they can find out more about you right now and then probably sign up for a newsletter so they can know exactly when the book comes out.
Sure. So my website is heatherleia.com. So it's Heather and then LEAH.com. And the book comes out May 1st. It's called Let's Make Yoga Magic. And if you go on Amazon and just type Let's Make Yoga Magic, you can pre-order it right then and there. And then it will just show up right at your house. I think there's Prime delivery on it. So right on like May 1st or May 2nd, you'll have a brand new book to share with your family, or give to nieces, nephews, any little one who likes to move.
What a great gift if you're a grandparent and you're out there and you have 4 or 5 grandkids. Boy, you send each one of these books, and then every time you visit, you can sit down and do a little bit of yoga with the kids. And what a great intergenerational activity to do.
Totally. That sounds so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that vision of that.
And the book is being published by our friends at Familius, and they always do such a great job, and they're really, really creative, so check it out. I've had such a great time tonight. Make sure you check out the book. You can order it now, pre-order it now. Let's Make Yoga Magic by Heather Leia. Heather, thanks so much for being part of the show tonight. Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Jody Stapler. She is going to tell us about her wonderful new kidlet, Pepper, Miss Pepperoni. Hey, I need to make a comment. Heather Leia, she wasn't being rude by not saying goodbye. Her laptop ran out, her battery ran out, and we get disconnected. But it was right at the very, very end of the interview, so I just kind of wrapped it up. I really enjoyed speaking to Heather. Do check out her book, Let's Make Yoga Magic. Hey, we also want you to check out our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. It is a wonderful way to help your book stand out amongst the crowd of books that are released every single month. Thousands and thousands of books. How can you compete? Well, one way is by letting folks know that your book passed the rigorous evaluation process at the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. We have a wonderful panel of evaluators. They're educators, they're teachers, they're parents, they're kids. And if they believe your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, then your book becomes a certified great read. And with that status comes all sorts of great tools that will help your book stand out. It will help parents know that your book is worthy of their consideration. And we would really appreciate it if you would consider our program, Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read. Check it out today at readingwithyourkids.com. We want to thank Heather Leia for being here today. We want to thank you for being here today. Thank you so much for taking the time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading and maybe doing yoga with your kids. I'll be looking through the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.